Hi, everybody. Welcome to our second of 5 in our series of design thinking webinars in which we go through each step of the design thinking process so that you can design learning experiences that drive business results. My name is Brittany Cole. I am the Director of Learning Experience and Innovation at GP Strategies, and I'll be walking with you during this entire webinar series. Today we're going to focus on the define phase. The previous session was all about empathize and what it means to really understand who your learners are and who your audience is. And today is that when we think about who those audience members and those learners are, what truly is the problem we're trying to solve for. Let's do a quick level set on what design thinking is. And as we think about what it is as a big picture, it's not germane to just learning, but it's really a way to solve problems. It's used in software development, it's used in app development, it's used in product design, and really when we think about the core of design thinking, it's about the human-centered mindset. It's a process, it's a problem-solving approach, and it's really all about that end user. And so as we think about design thinking versus other ways in which we've designed learning experiences, maybe through the ADDIE approach, there's elements that are going to be consistent, but design thinking always brings you back to that end user, that your learners have an experience that is impactful and meaningful and really relevant to them so that they come back wanting more. As we think of where we are in the design thinking process, we are at define, and we're going to, again, go through each of these sessions in a short webinar to help give you practical tips and tricks so that you can use this process to help you create those experiences yourself. So again, when we think about the three core principles of design thinking, it's know who your learners are, know your audience, know your problem, which is where we're going to focus our energies on today during this webinar, and then take action by testing solutions. So we're really expediting the point from where we understand who our learners are to taking action, right? It's an action-oriented approach and mindset that really rallies around that problem you're trying to solve. So we're not doing a whole bunch of analysis and getting into analysis paralysis. So we're saying, okay, we know what this problem is, let's tackle it. Okay, so if we think about where we are, we went through a series of activities where we empathized with our learners. Maybe we did interviews, we shadowed, we brought in multidisciplinary teams and perspectives, whether they're new hires or experienced individuals, very senior to very junior, to really understand, okay, where are you at? What does your day-to-day look like? And now that you know who you're trying to solve the problem for, we have to define what the problem is. And that essentially is two questions. Is what is the problem that we're solving for, and what's the impact that we want to have if that problem is solved? And if you think of it, it's really a ripple effect, right? When we think about problem solving, and maybe that problem solving has a skills and knowledge component, there's not just the impact on that end learner, but it's also the learner's leader, that leader's leader, and even the organization. So when you think about defining your problem, you actually might want to not just look at the learner, but every ripple beyond who that learner impacts, from the leader to the organization. Often, as we think about where we sit in organizations, we receive requests. And often the subject matter expert or our business partner, they're the ones that provide us with that problem statement. They say there's a problem with the learners because they're not following process, or they're not selling enough, or they need to do a better job at providing a superior customer experience. And so often the problem statement has a slant that is really a one-sided slant. And our challenge is really to understand that the problem really can be different or have different layers depending on who you're talking to. So what we find a lot of times is we take that subject matter expert's problem statement as truth, and we build a solution around it, and maybe it's an innovative solution that has videos or animations or 3D or virtual reality or e-learning and digital training, whatever that package and that program might be. we might be solving the problem only from one perspective, not necessarily from the learner's perspective. And so in design thinking, it's not just accepting that subject matter expert's problem statement as truth, but it's trying to think of more of a how might we statement. How might we solve this problem for these different perspectives? The perspective of the business, the perspective of the learner, and maybe there's even other perspectives, right, from that learner's leader or from operations. And one way that we find really effective to help you create that problem statement that allows you to solve the problem from all those different angles is building something that's called a point of view statement. I will share what that point of view statement is when you think about how we solve this problem differently from each angle. So if we think about a point of view statement, but what we have is really the same problem and it's defined differently. So for instance, our business partner might say, we have to retrain because salespeople aren't getting customer approval. So let's think about the situation in which you're in customer service, you're selling a product, and before the customer can purchase the product, they have to explicitly say they approve. And maybe the request you get is from that business partner to say, we have to provide training because they're not doing that today. But if you think about design thinking, that's not just the only lens you're receiving. You're going to talk to maybe the operations director. Maybe that's the director of the customer service center. And their problem is, I don't have time for people to go train. We are under pressure. We have numbers to meet, so I can't retrain them. And maybe the learner, the one who is actually going to be the one who's going to receive this potential training, they're going to say, it's not a training issue. I know what I have to say and do, but it takes too long, and I'm losing customers and not selling, or I'm not providing a good customer experience. So really, the problem is the same, but it's defined differently from different people. And if we use a point of view statement, which looks something like this, it's going to help you reframe the problem, one, from the learner's perspective. So the username is really your learner. So your learner needs it. So in this case, it would be, say, the salespeople. The salespeople need a way to do something. And if we think about what they need to do, is they need to capture explicit customer approval. But then we tag that with because, right? So if we think about the subject matter or the business partner, they really only gave us that top line, right? They need to do this, and we immediately go to training. But if we add that word because, it actually might give us some surprising insights. And it also might help us define those different perspectives of how that problem can be solved. So let's take that customer approval situation and let's kind of show it in a way where we have the problem and we have this sort of point of view statement framework, and then we talk about it and how might we solve that for these different lenses. So you can see that here on the screen. So that problem is, the salespeople, which is your end learner, they're frustrated about a lengthy customer approval process. And they need a way to provide a customer experience and do not have the current process get in the way. And so if we build out that problem statement and we see it as more of a holistic issue, what it does is it helps us break down that problem and it helps us give us some ways to solve it. So it's more of, here's our problem, and now how might we make customer approval easier, right? So we're thinking of the learner perspective, or faster, right? We're also thinking of the operations person. How might we help salespeople understand that customer approval is an important part of a great customer experience? So it talks through customer experience, but it also talks about the why, which is maybe where the business partner was trying to get at in the first place. And then also, it could be a skills issue, right? How can you provide support, but maybe it doesn't take them away from the job? So the problem statement exercise helps you define the problem, but it helps you break it down into each of those different perspectives. So you might be wondering, okay, this is great, but what are some ways in which we can sort of uncover this? And so here are some 3 different sort of activities that you can walk through with your team. So that could be that group that has a combination of business partners, learners, leaders, and one might be a collaboration exercise where you revisit those initial questions when you were going through your empathy interviewing, and you're just going around the room and saying, okay, what are we solving for? And when you have everybody in the same room providing feedback on what they actually think the problem is, it's going to be rather insightful because you're going to hear those different perspectives, and then you can start to draw some common themes. And one way you can sort of identify those trends is create an affinity diagram or a mind map where you can start to use sticky notes or a whiteboard and categorize those different problem statements or those different perceptions of the problem into different groupings. You might even ask them to do a Mad Lib, right? Go back to that statement, right? The learner needs to do something because of X. And if everyone built that and you can compare them, you might be able to see some common trends and come up with one single statement that everybody can have consensus over. I will tell you, I still use that point of view statement. I have an image of it that I keep on my desktop because it helps me always go back. And it's a reminder of what we're actually solving for as opposed to an assumption that I might have or my business partner might have. So when we think about the defined problem, right, and we think about how design thinking is really works together with learning experiences because it's a cohesive and a complementary problem-solving process with what we're trying to do as learning professionals. It's going to help us, one, understand what we're trying to solve for, and it's going to make it so much easier down the line to measure that business impact because we actually have a defined problem that we're all aligned in, and that direction is clear. So when you think about this phase, once you know your learner and you know your problem, then you're going to be in a really great position to start to ideate solutions. And that's what we'll talk to next in our next webinar, is taking that problem statement and starting to take action and say, okay, what can we do to make this a meaningful and relevant experience that's going to generate results. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you on the next webinar.